Most people view the foster and adoption industry as a way to protect and look after children in need of a home. In reality, the system often falls very short of achieving that goal, and instead frequently ends up hurting the children that are in their care. A serious issue arises when foster care companies become privatized and their purpose shifts from looking out for what's best for the children and changes to how to make the most money. The government will provide these companies money for every child in their care, but that money doesn't come if the child is reunited with their biological family. This only incentivizes these companies to take in more kids, even those who don't necessarily need to be taken from their families, as well as work to keep those kids within the system once they're there, which is highly detrimental to what should be the goal of the foster system, eventual reunification with the child's biological family. And once the children enter the system, they are exposed to a whole slew of discrimination and abuse that is prevalent within the foster care industry. Racial biases are extremely common, and POC children are not only more likely to be taken from their families in the first place, but also more likely to remain in the system long term. African American children are 4.5 times more likely to re-enter foster care once leaving than white children, and children of 2 or more races are 4 times more likely to enter it than white children. Native children have also been historically vastly overrepresented in the system, with Alaskan Native and Indigenous children making up 2% of the children in the foster system, despite the fact these demographics only account for 1% of the overall population. This is no surprise when you account for the U.S.'s long history of removing Indigenous children from their families in an attempt to separate them from their cultures. A law was put in place to prevent this from happening within the foster care system, called the Indian Child Welfare Act, that gives protections to these children and prioritizes other Indigenous people to adopt them. This act, despite only being around for about 50 years, has been called into question recently, with lawmakers claiming it's now become irrelevant. The removal of this act would be detrimental to the Indigenous children in the foster system right now, as it would allow agencies, which have already been shown to have racial biases, to strip them of their cultures and keep them away from their families. Foster children in their teens also face a lot more complications than their younger counterparts. A lot of foster parents foster with the intention to adopt, and that means they often go for younger children instead of the countless teenagers in the system. The difference in teenagers versus children in the foster system who are currently placed in a home is drastic, with 95% below the age of 12 compared to only 58% 13 and above. Teenagers are at a critical stage of development where they need a good support system around them. When they are aged out of the foster system after bouncing from home to home, it makes them more likely to not complete school, to have teen pregnancies, to experience homelessness, and to go to jail. Similar to how people don't often want to take on teens, they don't want to take on sibling groups either. Unfortunately, most kids in foster care with siblings are separated them. Nearly 70% to be exact. That's only 30% of kids that get to remain with their siblings. When it is shown that kids allowed to stay with their siblings are less likely to have behavior problems, often do better in school, and are more likely to become close to their foster parents. Separating siblings from one another when these children have already gone through immense trauma can be nothing but further harm to their mental states. The system as a whole is flawed for nearly every demographic of children that enters it, but it can't just be destroyed. Children without parents or a stable home do need a safe place to stay. To create that environment, the foster system needs a huge revamp, with the first step being to prevent children from being separated from their siblings, as well as fighting against the removal of the Indian Child Welfare Act, to which I have linked a petition in the description. The foster system will also need to be deprivatized if we truly want its focus to be on helping the children in its care, instead of using them as commodities. Thank you for watching, and please consider signing the linked petition once again to keep in place the Indian Child Welfare Act.